Good morning. My name is Terry Lynch. I'm the CEO of Power Nickel. I'm here today with my partner in exploration crime, Kenneth Williamson. Kenneth's managing director of 3D Geo, which is the consulting geological engineering firm that we're using to model and guide our exploration in our Nisk Nickel sulfide project in James Bay, Quebec. Quite a mouthful for early in the morning, but yeah, we're happy to come here today and tell you more about the deposit and what we're trying to achieve there.
Terry, Ken, good to meet you. Good to have you on the show, so to speak. Looking forward to understanding a little bit more about the drivers for Power Nickel as we go ahead. Terry, perhaps before we kind of get started, could you just give us a quick background on how you came to the deposit and how you kind of set it up? And
yeah, it was quite interesting. I was an investor in a company called Critical Elements, which is a very fine lithium hard rock company based in Quebec. It's actually in this neighborhood, about 40 clicks away, with their project that's just ready to shovel ready. Really, it's ready to go. And another friend suggested that was I aware of this nickel deposit that was on their books? And I said, no, I wasn't. And then we looked at it, and he says, Terry, I think you should buy it. And I said, well, I'm running a copper gold company. How does that fit? He said, well, this is actually going to become a mine. He says, the other stuff is who knows, So he said, this is your lower risk way to get to the title. So I looked at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I thought, he's right. This is a later stage project that had a lot of upside. We looked at it, we compared it with some other deposits like Metals and Palladium One, and we looked at sort of the amount of drilling that had been done with the metal in the ground as sort of as a measuring stick. And we felt that this was very prospective, and so it's tough, it's rare, it's to find these deposits is really, really tough. So to get one that was sort of in an advanced stage that we thought we could grow seemed to be a good practical business idea for us as a company. And then we were able to we had a relationship with management. We were able to I think make a fair deal for both shareholder bases, and we sort of went on that way. So that's sort of how that happened. And we basically closed in February, I think, of last year. And then we basically, we found Kenneth through, they had done a lot of work with Critical Elements. And so they were very familiar with the area. And we tasked them with modeling the deposit first to sort of get a better view of how it could be put together. It had never been done before. And so they took a few months in putting that together. And then they ultimately, they suggested a geological theory about how the deposit might flow out, and based on that they suggested a first stage of exploration that we eventually permitted and drilled in December of this year, and we released the results really in the last month, and I would say they were very good results, and they basically substantiated we had a historical resource of about 3.1 million tons, sort of spread almost a third between measured, indicated, and inferred. And as a historical resource, once it drops beyond a certain number of years, you have to basically requalify it. So that was our primary objective in this round of exploration, was to do enough work so that we could do a new technical report and a new current 43-101. So we hope to get that out in early Q2. And then the other point, of course, was to try and show that there was expansion, that the deposit had legs, and we could possibly move this from 3 million tons to 4, and and further. Obviously, ultimately, probably have to get to at least 8 to 10 million tons to be commercial, and these deposits worldwide tend to range sort of from between 8 to 50 million tons. So that's sort of that's what attracted us to the whole thing, and why we sort of went after it the way we did.
There's quite a lot to unpack there, but thank you. That's a very good background. Perhaps this is a question for Kenneth, I'm not sure, but what was the amount of work that was done? What did you have to go on? How much drilling had been done? How much work had been done? And actually, when was it done?
I can go ahead if you wish.
Sure, yeah, Ken, that's great. Yeah.
When it was done, I guess, looking at the history of the project, it had been worked since the early 1990, I would guess, just before the year 2000s. And then bunch of holes were drilled there. If I'm counting them out, it's probably in the range of 30 holes, 35 holes that were drilled in the past. And that allowed them to define that resource that Terry mentioned. And with the results that they currently had, what we decided to do with that is to revisit, I guess, those results and tackled it in our way, which is geology first and mineralization after. And as Terry was mentioning, we ended up with defining where in that deposit versus the historic holes location, where would it be the most pertinent for us to be drilling at this stage? And the reasons for that drilling, I guess, for me and my own standpoint, was to kill two birds with one stone. Well, first, trying to expand that deposit, because from what we see, it's wide open in pretty much all direction. And secondly, to demonstrate the validity of the historical drill hole data that we can't validate right now because we do not have access to the old assay certificates and things like that. But with the current drilling that we've done and the position that we've selected for those new holes, we'll be able to validate the resource that was pre-existing on the deposit, validating that the results are real. We have been able to demonstrate that, and the upcoming step will be to crank this up into a real formal resource that will be NI 43101 compliant.
Thank you. Goodness, lots to go on there as well. So it was drilled in the 1990s, and I mean 30 to 35 holes is not a lot of drilling for. Actually, it might be useful if you could just pull up a map, just so we can understand kind of where you are. I mean, presumably you're an Archean Canadian shield, which is highly deformed and strained.
Pooh. All right. So that should do the trick here.
Do you have a general map of kind of the location from the presentation, rather before we get kind of straight into the model, just to orientate me, just to understand. And Terry, you mentioned Palladium 1 as from what I can remember of their nickel target. They are in an area that hasn't been explored for nickel before, so is the Nisk project in a nickel area?
Ken could probably best answer that. I don't think there's been any other historic nickel discoveries in the area, but I could be wrong. I'm not aware of any in the immediate area. Ken, is there?
Other than small showings, I'm not aware either of major discoveries in this area, other than the one that Power Nickel has in his hand right now.
Okay, and can you just describe roughly the geology of Nisk?
Yes, absolutely. So on screen is a geological map of the area. The Nisk deposit is on the far right of this map. In the center portion, we can see the property outline here. What we see is that the property straddles two main geological domain, one to the north and another one in the center here, which is separated from another domain to the south, but this is out of concern for us. So the property straddling that contact between those two major domains, and at that contact, what we have is a series of layers of different volcanic rocks. One of them is a ultramafic package. And within that ultramafic package, that's where the nickel deposit got developed. And it's a very typical nickel formation or the formation of the deposit is very, very typical there, in the sense that the volcanism will generate those magma flows, and the nickel minerals that are heavier will crystallize at first, and gravity will do its job, and those crystals or minerals will then sink at the bottom of that lava flow. So it's a natural concentration of the ore that will occur there. So that's a good thing for us. And then
would you describe that as komatiitic? Is that the
absolutely? Yeah.
I'm just going to open a window. I'm boiling.
Peridotitic rocks, actually. Yeah, so those layers of ultramafic rocks, peridotitic rocks, and they are the main host of such deposit. The beauty of this is we can follow this down quite easily. That layer, or the main host rock, can be followed up very, very easily by drilling. And the nature of that deposit makes it such that sometimes you would drill ultramafic rocks, there won't be any ore in it, but in this case, 100% of the holes, new holes that we've drilled, demonstrated that komatiite or ultramafic panel is well mineralized, and we didn't find where it would end.
So I'm going back to kind of my geology school in my geology class at university. I thought when the nickel was deposited on the base of these lava flows, the flows were incredibly hot and they cut channels, and that you actually get it's almost like a ribbon or a kind of a frozen river of nickel at the base, rather than it's not like the bottom of a lake where it just kind of sediments out, but actually it's in these kind of these running running flows. Is that what you're looking at here, or is it just kind of a settling on a lake bed, kind of magma or lava, or is it a cross between the two?
It's difficult to answer that question now. I haven't done the, say, scientific research behind all of this in great detail as of yet. I'd have a tendency to think it's channeling flows there. That doesn't mean that it cannot be of a vast extent, but we do see from the results so far some, let's say, higher grade mineralization trends in a long view, for instance, which leads us to think that there may be some higher grade vectors within the panel itself. So that could be leading towards the first idea you had, where those super hot lavas would force their way wherever they want to go, and nickel would be deposited there, which would then complexify a little bit our strategy in terms of drilling, because we need then to identify where those channels went. But so far, what we've taken into as an approach was, at the scale it has right now, we see it as a very simple, straightforward panel, and we're trying to drill that very, very systematically. It's very an easy project to tackle, to tell you the truth.
Okay, and the fact that you've hit sulfides with all of your drill holes to date, and presumably it's pentlandite. Is that the mineral you're intersecting in core?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the structural complexity? I mean, because it's an Archean terrain. You're talking about S0. The mineralization, the primary mineralization, came in parallel to bedding.
Yep.
And then it's going to have been folded and deformed with geological time.
Yes.
And perhaps that high grade kind of zone that you were just talking about could relate to a structural thickening or some kind of post sedimentary, post formation deformation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're bang on. Actually, that's probably one of the reasons why Power Nickel and Critical Elements contacted me at first, or contacted my little firm, We're well known here in our little small industry as being the structural gurus before being economic geologists here. It's a philosophy thing that I'm carrying with me since about 10, 15 years now, where even if it's well-known deposit, I will force myself to not even look at the ore at first, trying to unravel what the geology is all about, especially the structural component, and then throw the mineralization in there to understand what mineralization is with respect to that geological framework. So we've tackled the Nisk deposit exactly that same way. So at first we looked at the regional context, identified that major structure I was referring to earlier, which is a major contact or a major fault.
It looks like you drew it as a thrust.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a major thrust fault in there. And then we were wondering about what kind of impact such a deformation history could have had on those initial layers of magma. So we identified a few faults that are cross-cutting the deposit. So definitely very important to tackle that and to understand offsets and things like that. And then we tried to study a bit what was the impact of them faults on the mineralization, a little bit as if it was gold-related deposit. Usually you'd get an enrichment at cross-cutting location where two structures would intersect or something like that. In this particular case, it doesn't seem to have impacts on the grade, but definitely has impact on offsets.
And potential thickness and potential repetition.
Yeah, absolutely. So the faults we've identified right now are simple to tackle. We do not see any kind of major offsets that would tear apart the deposit. It's relatively minor offset at the scale we're talking about. So essentially the conclusion here, simple panel to drill due to the initial or the initial nature of the ore body itself, structurally not very complex, well mineralized. So it's a perfect, little ore body to tackle. It did make our lives so easy. You just look at the panel, you drill where there's no pierce point. That's all.
And what are you doing? Are you kind of grid drilling it? Have you got a series of fences that you're doing kind of 2 holes in? What are your thicknesses? What's your drill spacing and approach at the moment? And drill depth?
Yeah. For the first pass of drilling, what Power Nickel needed was to confirm that the deposit is really a deposit. So what we've done then is to ensure that all drill holes that we do were meant to test something. So we didn't drill for the sake of drilling like systematically on a grid, or it was well thought of pierce points. And essentially, as I did mention before, the idea there was to validate the historical data and to move on with our own understanding of the deposit, knowing that we'd move ahead very soon to an I-43-101 compliant resource work. So all of the drill holes that were drilled this year or recently with the newly released results were meant, each of them, to test something. It could have been, for some of the holes, the extension of the deposit, either at depth or laterally. And in some other cases, it has been designed to actually trying to reproduce the really good results that they get or got historically, and then to basically demonstrate the results that were there. And we systematically, I believe, with the holes that were released, demonstrated what we had to demonstrate with that. So very, very happy. And that will lead to designing a second phase of drilling based on that new knowledge that we just acquired. And at that case, we still need to discuss exactly what that drilling plan is going to be. But certainly the intention at this point, to me, or my recommendation anyways, would be to drill with having in mind expanding the deposit this time. There is no more need, I don't think, to demonstrate that it's there anymore. We've
okay,
done
and
a good job.
Remind me what an kind of a typical thickness is, a typical grade and thickness is for a panel.
It varies.
It's interesting, isn't it, that these nickel deposits don't they don't get affected by structure much. Apparently they retain their integrity because you're by a major fault in an Archean terrain, and describing it as relatively simple panels. It's
yeah, absolutely. But if I may add a little complementary thought on that, that's really interesting comment you said. We think that it's relatively undeformed at the scale of the deposit or where it is now, but we're investigating right now on a more regional aspect because it's caught in a basin with thrust faults on either side. We're kind of wondering, is it possible that that same layer that contains that nickel, the mineralization, is it possible that it would have been folded back on itself somehow? So having some sort of a basin.
Final, yeah.
So on each side could be nickel mineralization. So our investigation is ongoing on that as well, on the regional aspect, and where else could Terry and Power Nickel explore to find more of that in the area.
Yeah. And I'm always amazed by strain partitioning in geological structures, where you can have huge amounts of deformation and strain on a plane, and then relatively nearby you've got rocks which have got a kind of a fabric intact.
Absolutely, and that brings another point. That is that strain partitioning is kind of working for us at this point, in the sense that the nature of the deposit, the layering that we see in terms of the different rock types that we have there, with a sequence of having felsic rocks that are much more competent than the ultramafic rocks usually, especially when those ultramafic rocks aren't mineralized, then they will become very talcose and schistose, such that they will focus deformation there, leaving almost intact the other rock formations surrounding that. So that's a positive thing for us as well. In terms of results that we got, grade and thickness, the thickness we're getting is averaging about 15 meter, which is quite considerable. Some of the holes were a little thinner than that, down to 5 meters, 4 meters, but we got intersections that are quite large, almost 20 meters in some cases, of good material. Grading average here, I see probably over 1% nickel overall, with really good grades at 1.4% nickel. Lots of, well, relatively speaking, good percentage of copper, cobalt, palladium, and platinum in there.
Just remind me, remind me of the copper grades and the cobalt and then did you say palladium?
Copper grades, I guess, would be in the range of 0.4%, with cobalt in the range of 0.1. Palladium probably in the range of 1 gram per ton, which is quite good actually. And platinum probably in the range of 0.4, 0.5%. Grams per ton, sorry.
Yeah. That's a meaningful credit. I mean, if it's almost $100 of palladium in the rock there.
Yeah, and and discussing with some of my partners recently, they were impressed by those numbers in the sense that, well, it's a nickel deposit, but the byproducts, are almost as good. Yeah, almost as good as the primary mineral that we're trying to extract from there. So it's a really, really interesting story there unfolding.
And when it comes to the resource, which historically was about a third, close to 1 million tons of measured, indicated, and inferred each, this exercise that you've done, have you done enough work, or will you need to do another phase of drilling to be able to restate that resource?
With the holes that we have right now, I'd feel comfortable to redo the resource. I'm not too sure what kind of numbers we'd get this time, but definitely should be very similar to what they had in the past, in the sense that we've re-drilled the drilled area, so we can't reinvent the wheel, I guess.
So sorry, just quick. You said you didn't have the assay certificates, but have you got the positions of each of the samples?
Absolutely.
So you've got the positions, you've got the whole data. Do you have access to the core?
I think we do have access to some of that core, but not all of them holes. That's the reason. So for unfortunately, in this case, I don't think it is possible to go back and do what could have been done in other scenarios, I guess, where the old core is there and available. You can resample it, redo the old job. We're not in that position, but we're replacing that former information with new, which allow us to confirm that the old information was correct and accurate. We won't be able to use those holes probably in the NI 43-101 resource unless we can convince ourselves that the duplicate holes that we've done are good enough, but that be risky. And still, with what we have, we'll be able to come up with a resource which will be compliant with the regulation. In terms of categories, because of the few holes that we have to play with right now, I don't think we'll be able to end up with measured and indicated resource that much. Yeah. It may be falling down into the inferred category at this stage, for the most part. But with the second phase of drilling that we will do, I was mentioning expanding the deposit could be a prime thing. Well, infill drilling certainly will be discussed, in at least in some areas, to ensure that we can actually end up with a resource that is compliant in terms of drill spacing and things like that.
As you were talking, describing how it was most likely to the new resource, the numbers will stay the same as the old resource, but mostly in the inferred category. I was thinking to myself about your comment about expanding. I bet there's going to be a discussion at the board level with Terry.
Yes.
Give me some measured.
Yes. No, indeed, of course. And the intention is to push that. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, but I believe Power Nickel right now is pushing that really, really hard on pretty much all fronts at the same time. So that is great for me, and I really do appreciate the excitement shown by my client. Because all of those things usually would need to discuss and decide, which one are we doing first and what will be the sequence of action here. With Power Nickel, it seems that the sequence of actions is everything now. So it's great. I can't ask for better.
Okay, so
on my own standpoint, anyway,
I'm gonna leave the internal discussion as to how much drilling gets done for the extension, and how much gets taken up on infill drilling. But I've got two questions. One is how much drilling? I guess this is more for you, Terry. The first question is for Terry, which is how much more drilling will you be doing this year? And then the second question back to Kenneth. for where would you like to kind of, perhaps you can show me on the slide when we come to it, where you're planning to expand. But sorry, Terry, you first.
Sure. Yeah. So we basically announced a fully funded 5,000 meter program that'll start, obviously when the exploration team is ready to go, but we're thinking probably early June and continue on for however long that takes, probably 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. And then we will consolidate that information and then subject to financing, because ultimately we will need more money. We would look to do a second program in sort of November, December, and possibly on through, and probably as much as 20,000 meters at that point in time. If you look at the math, if you want to get to the 10 million tons, that's sort of probably where you have to go. Now, whether you do it in two 10,000 meter programs, that'll be subject to discussion and debate with the exploration team, and however they think it's best to go, we'll do. But we obviously it's a tremendous nickel and price environment, and a nickel sulfate deposits themselves are just because of their the potential for the class 1 nickel they could yield, are pretty popular amongst the industry types. So you couldn't get a better time to sort of macro wise push this. So we feel like it's obviously we want to push it, but we want to push it using good science, so that we're obviously doing the right things exploration wise, that we're not drilling for the sake of drilling, we're drilling for the sake of expansion and for technical advancement. So but we're going to get it, we won't let resources get in the way here. We'll focus a lot of energy on this and try and bring it forward as quick as we can.
Quick question. You talk about starting in early June. You talk about doing it again in November, December. Are these kind of logistically constrained campaigns in the field? Can you work there year round? Do you need to get in there with a helicopter or an ice road or
no? I mean, Ken can speak to it maybe better, but my understanding is you can basically drive off the road. I mean, there's a major Hydro-Quebec substation across the road from us. There's a paved highway up there. So I mean, there's breakup in the summer when the ground is mushy and not really conducive. So I think that's not a time. So sort of like the next couple of months, probably not the ideal time to be there. There may be something similar to that in the fall. I'm not sure, but generally speaking, other than the breakup, I think you're pretty much good. What do you think, Ken?
It's probably that, yeah. The ministry here in Quebec will prevent us to walk into swamps and things like that when it's unfreezing, thawing down, I guess, during the spring. And other than that, when it becomes dry again, we're free to get there. The property is super easy to access via the main highway getting to Chibougamau, and then a secondary road to get there. There's a power station from Hydro-Quebec that is next by, so it's well maintained access and stuff. No issue there.
Great, thank you. And can you pull up the sections for the
absolutely
kind of the extension drilling plans?
So a long view would do.
Yeah, sure.
I think it shows it all. So what we see on screen here is a long view looking north, almost. And the main Nisk panel that we've been discussing about so far is that main panel that we see here, with all of those pierce points that are the historical drill hole, and the 7 new holes that are mixed and matched. I didn't separate them out, but all the holes are there now, so it gives you the extent of the drilling. Those bigger spheres are what we propose to Terry and Power Nickel as a second phase of drilling there. Yep. So couple things happening at different scales. First, we're still focusing on that main panel. So as you can see, we're suggesting drilling at depth
So just quick question. So that whole panel is what, 500 meters across?
The scale here is about that. No, it's a kilometer. So it's 1 kilometer across by, well, 500 meters down, I guess, something like that. 350 meters, almost 400 meters down. Yeah. And we're suggesting to drill below that. What we see here as the colors, by the way, this is not a resource work. It's a numerical model that we've elaborated using Leapfrog. And the idea there was not to calculate economics or real numbers, but to see a visual display of the grade distribution in there.
And thickness?
And thickness. So what we see is a grade thickness map, pretty much. Using nickel and the thickness to calculate that. And we can clearly see a couple trends in there. One seems to be shallowly or moderately plunging towards the west in that direction. Another trend perhaps can be seen here, seems to be plunging the other way. I have the impression that the secondary trend that we see here, where it gets a lot less good on the top portion of the lens here, is related to one of them faults that I was talking about, which could have some impact on the deposit in terms of offsetting the mineralized lens. And that fault, actually, if we can visualize it quickly here, just to see where it is, if I may find it. So for instance, that little panel here, which is semi-transparent, we can play with it a bit. If I make it opaque, we can see where the fault seems to be cutting the deposit here. And it seems to be limiting the deposit towards the east in terms of expansion potential. But that is in that view only, in the sense that what we've interpreted right now is that fault, looked in plan view now, seems to be offsetting the lens further towards the east, such that we also think that there is a great potential to discover something brand new, actually just to the east of that deposit. So what we will do is to predict somehow or guesstimate what kind of offset should there be along that fault over here. Well, that would an exercise that we've already done to end up with what would be the prime two targets that we would be drilling to follow this up across the fault. And then some more drilling to confirm the link and to confirm the eastern expansion as well of that new panel that could be discovered. Should we be
is that backed up by field data, by mapping, by
yes,
field sampling?
Mapping in geophysics seems to be indicating, well, shows the offset first. That's where that fault is coming from. And on the other side of the fault, the magnetic signature and or the geology stays the same. So there's no real indication that this would not happen. Well, they're playing devil's advocate. There's no indication that this will happen, but it needs to be tested because there's no drilling there. So it's, to me, a prime target for that reason. A little bit the same approach, but on the other side of the deposit, we can see a couple drill holes, historical drill holes that did nail down on some, well, relatively weak but nickel mineralization towards the west. So same deal here. We've identified another fault, which is subparallel to the first one. And I'll just put that back in a plan view here for you guys, where we can see the two faults running subparallel to each other. The main deposit right now appears to be caught within or between them two faults. So same idea as having potential offsets to the east. we see the couple drill holes, historical drill holes, being a really nice indication that potential offset could also happen to the west. So,
and can you just give me an indication of what the green color on the panel that indicates in terms of gram meters? Are we talking 5 to 10 in terms of numbers?
Between 2.5 and 5.
2.5 and 5. So I was one category out. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, and that to us is really good indication that more drilling should be done where the two historical drill holes were drilled, and it obviously, when we read old reports and things, the rationale for the former company drilling those two holes is they had indication on surface and on the mag map that the same kind of setting was happening down there as well. So drilling more this area to confirm presence of nickel mineralization to the west would lead to the discovery of a second panel, which we believe at this point in the game could be as much or important as the main panel, and who knows, maybe bigger. You know, nothing prevents us to be optimistic at this stage.
Great, thank you very much. Could you drop the image? That would be really helpful. And I'm almost wrapping up because we've been going for a good while now. But who does the field work? Who does the work on the ground? Is that part of your subcontracting? No,
it's more Critical Elements that takes care of that part through another firm which is called Consultec, well-known firm here in Val-d'Or as well. They are well known to provide field expertise like that. They are well set up to build camps and stuff like that, which is not necessary for the Nisk project. It's easy. There is, well, not a resort, but some sort of a camp already existing there that we can rent rooms in there, and having access to a cook and things like that. So it's very nice set up there.
And whose camp is that?
Yeah, it's just like a private fishing lodge type of scenario, and So Consultec is a very good execution partner. They've been around for many years. I think J.S. Lavallee and his dad have that's one of their principal side businesses, and they've been very good at that. So, I mean, that was one of the real benefits for us at Power Nickel, where we were able to tap into the local domain expertise that Critical had spent so much time developing and spending money on. And we were able to sort of flow seamlessly into it using CAN, using Consultec. So you don't waste a lot of time on admin and finding people and hopefully getting the right people. You can hit the ground running. So that's, really, how tough that is in this business.
Yeah,
that's brutal. So we were, blessed by that, and so thankful that we were able to take advantage of it. So we can just put our money in the ground and not chase rainbows.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I've as always on these interviews, I learned so much. I've watched the videos beforehand, and I go through the presentation, and I go through your website, and then in 40 minutes talking to you, my knowledge changes completely about the project and about the company. So thank you very much. That's been a really useful education for me, and I hope it's a useful education for the viewers as well. I look forward to seeing how you get on during the course of the year.
Great, Merlin. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate you taking the time. And Ken, thanks again, and you did great.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, for the invitation. And thanks, Merlin, for the nice interview. Really appreciate that.
Nice talking to you. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you.